Hey everyone, thanks for joining. It'll just be a minute here. Let a few people filter in. If you are able to, feel free to drop in just like a hello in the chat. That way I know that you can see everything that I'm doing and that you can hear me clearly. This situated here. Testing out a new microphone setup after we did the last discussion. Hopefully this one's a little bit more clear. Hello, Peach. Thanks for joining. So the way I've structured this. Um, I'll go through and take any questions that anybody might have, or if we want to talk about anything specific related to Keratosis Pilaris, we can jump into those discussions. Otherwise, I'll just kind of run through a number of different topics on questions that I've been receiving over the past couple of weeks that seem to be, pretty frequent. A lot of people have similar questions about different things related to KP, related to supplementation in the skin, things of that nature. So if you have anything you'd like to talk about specifically, just drop it into the chat. All right. Awesome. Yeah, that's a great topic. Yeah, we can chat about that. So differences in post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation versus seeing more of that parafollicular inflammation. That's a great topic. We'll cover that for sure. I've noticed there's a pretty big difference, especially when you're talking about different skin tones, where you have folks that have darker skin tones, will be definitely more focused on the post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation that develops from that inflammatory response around the follicles, versus people like myself, who obviously have very little pigmentation, and my inflammation is obviously much more visible than say, I mean, the pigmentation is still visible too, but the inflammation tends to be more of a concern for people with lighter skin tones. So two different things that you have to target at the same time. One of them is a precursor to the other. So if you are able to inhibit some of the inflammatory response in the skin, then you will not have that post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, at least to the level of severity that you might currently have it. Um, So yeah, I'll try and keep this. There's kind of two parts to this. I don't want to go too deep into talking about like things that I've created, unless there's like specific questions, or if people want to talk about that, then we can jump into it. I want to try and keep it more focused on keratosis pilaris, and what you'd like to talk about there. I will pull from research. If I don't know something, I won't make it up. I'll just tell you I don't know a specific um, answer to your question. I'll do some research on it, but I have a body of research that I've obviously compiled about keratosis pilaris that I think is pretty robust. I think I have a number of different areas that are definitely elucidated a little bit more than your average person. So that's what I'm trying to share. I will be very clear and upfront. I'm not a medical practitioner. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a dermatologist. So I'm just somebody who's spent a lot of time researching this very specific follicular impairment, this skin condition, and I think I have some interesting ideas on it. And obviously, there's some been some really positive feedback over the past number of weeks that has encouraged me to continue along with this and see what I can do. Gotcha. How long did it take until the KPRF of your son went slightly away? Yeah, so we can talk about KPRF. I wasn't anticipating as big of a response from um, the community on Reddit or just people in general around KPRF. I think it's something that I've put a lot more focus into since seeing that people were having some sort of reaction or a positive result. There's other folks too where the flushing and the redness in their skin hasn't died down as much. My son has, in general, lighter KPRF. Like you could still see the outlines of the flushing and inflammation, especially when there's some sort of like environmental change. If we were going out into the cold, or if he was running around and he got really hot, you could really see that inflammation, that redness and flushing kind of shoot up his cheeks. But he also has a lot of actual like keratin bumps, the lesions on the surface of his cheeks. And so when we began using this, my focus was on smoothing out his skin without causing additional irritation. But there are some really interesting things around cytokine response, the immune response in the skin, and how your skin barrier, if it's there's a permeability issue with the skin barrier in your skin on your face, how it reacts to these different environmental changes and pathogens. I think there's some really cool stuff that we can, go further into on how to reduce the immune response, that inflammatory response in the skin. One of them was around, well, again, this is going to be insulin growth factor 1. So, IGF-1 and its effects, its modulation on something called IL-10, which is a cytokine. They're like these little protein messengers that modulate the immune response in your skin. Um, so IGF-1 is able to upregulate something called IL-10, which the IL-10 cytokine, it's basically imagine like a little protein that gets secreted in the tissue, your skin tissue on your cheek, and it goes around and essentially regulates the immune response, the inflammatory response in other cells in the surrounding area. IL-10 is their responsibility, or the function of IL-10 is to shut down that inflammatory response, is to down regulate the inflammation. So in applying insulin growth factor 1, if you are or up regulating IL-10, and that in turn is down regulating the other pro-inflammatory cytokines, you can sometimes, I think, shift that immune response and that inflammatory response in your favor and reduce the inflammation in the skin, which is what I think we're seeing with some people that are trying out this topical raspberry ketone. In my son, it was pretty quick that I saw a reduction in flushing. It was longer for those paralytic lesions, those the actual bumps themselves, to reduce. But I'd say within about the first week and a half, we saw a pretty significant decrease in overall flushing. His baseline lowered, and I'd say right around like 3 or 4 weeks was when I felt like this is an obvious difference between before and after where that reduction had come in. Um, it's interesting because and in general, like any skin care, any sort of regimen that you're trying to implement, you can't really see, I think, the full effects of it until you're around like 6 to 8 weeks. But there's obviously like incremental improvements that lead up to reaching that 6 to 8 week time frame. And so for some people, they're showing really, really rapid results within like the first week, or they're like, I use this for 4 days and I see this decrease in flushing. And I hope it doesn't give too many people a false impression where they're like, okay, well, it's going to be 4 days and I'm going to get the exact same results. It's not exactly like that. Everybody's skin is very, very different, and there is a super complex regulatory network in your skin that manages things like proliferation, differentiation, cell death. There's a lot of stuff that's happening in the skin, and what I'm trying to target are very specific levers for reducing inflammation and also upregulating things like barrier proteins like FLG, filigrin, loricrin, and these other important components that help increase the overall cohesiveness of the skin barrier. That part takes time. So we're working on a time cycle of like 45 to 56 days typically for all of the different layers of your skin to turn over and replace themselves. And each time we go through this process of where you're seeing a complete refresh of your skin, epidermis, and all the keratinocytes that build up your skin tissue. My hope is if we are pushing on these different levers, these different mechanisms within the skin to increase barrier cohesiveness. That we will eventually, as the skin refreshes itself, improve that lipid lamellae, which is the fatty barrier that's in your epidermis. If we improve the cohesiveness and reduce permeability of that barrier each time your skin turns over, then that will eventually reduce in pathogens, environmental factors, and other things from triggering those inflammatory responses. So that process is a much longer one that's going to take, over the course of months rather than weeks. While up front, you have things like indirubin. So that's the active component within Indigo naturalis, which is downregulating pro-inflammatory cytokines and also reducing keratinocyte proliferation. That's something that happens a lot quicker, and it could be effective for a wider group of people, but it might not be effective for everybody. It's very dependent on the localized individual conditions of of a person's skin. So, do you know why KP disappears when some people are swimming in the sea? Yeah. So there's a couple of things there too. It might, I mean, it could be part of the mineral content and whatever body of water you're swimming in. That can have beneficial effects for sure. I think probably more prevalent is something that happens in your skin when you go out in the sun. So when you're out in the sun and you're out swimming wherever, you're getting that UV radiation that's hitting your skin. Your skin has a response. It starts secreting, or these are going to be fibroblasts, I think, but they start secreting vitamin D, and these vitamin D3, these analogs, have a lot of different effects on the skin. They trigger something. It's called a VDR, but vitamin D actually has some interplay with insulin growth factor, which I find really interesting. But part of what vitamin D does is it also is going to um, it regulates the UVB response in the skin. You're going to see that there's some reduction in inflammation. You're also, I mean, if you're out there in the sun long enough, you're going to kill off some of your skin cells too, just from getting your tan or a sunburn, which can reduce some of the texture and make your skin tone a little bit more consistent. But I think vitamin D supplementation has a place in this where just by virtue of being out in the sun, having your skin start to develop more vitamin D, it can have regulatory effects on keratinocyte life cycle. And for some people, I think it does help their keratosis pilaris. There's a lot of research that goes into that right now, and it's there's some areas that aren't elucidated on how vitamin D and IGF like interact to a certain level within the skin. But I definitely think that it's worth investigating more, and I think that there are therapeutic approaches to vitamin D supplementation that could improve KP. I'm not sure if that helps you a ton, but there's more to be found there. Yeah, I've done a lot of digging on vitamin D and its interplay with insulin growth factor in the skin, and it's not. I mean, there's research about it, but it's not elucidated. There's a lot to be found out there. And then, like I said, the mineral content sometimes, depending on where you're swimming, you might have some beneficial effects to the skin, but I definitely think it's more due to sun exposure. Than necessarily swimming specifically in the sea. Let's see. One thing I have noticed is that a light small hair grew about 1 week after applying Smooth KP. Hey, that's a good sign. Yeah. So vellus hairs. Vellus hairs are like the little peach fuzz that you get. It's all over your body. You have this little follicle, and there will be a very small vellus hair that comes out of that follicle. And folks with KP, typically that vellus hair will be brittle. It can become curled and trapped inside of that keratin scale, which is pretty common. And then if you have sebaceous gland atrophy, that's also going to negatively impact the development of that hair follicle. So that vellus hair would end up probably not growing the way that it needs to. Now, if you are upregulating insulin growth factor, one, Yeah, that also has an effect on the basal cells, the bulge at the bottom of that hair follicle, that proliferate into that vellus hair. And so, part of what I would expect to see with IGF-1 stimulation is that you would see regain of some of the vellus hair development that you would have across, the anterior surfaces of your skin. I certainly noticed that, in myself and applying these formulas over the years that I've been developing, that you'll have an improvement in vellus hair growth and production. It's a big area too for, I'm gonna mispronounce this, but UO, it's a subtype of KP where you start to have like alopecia of the eyebrows, and you'll lose some sort of hair follicle growth on different areas of the face or body. I think that's another, heavy indicator that insulin growth factor and the interplay it has with different peptides and proteins in the skin definitely contribute to the overall pathology of KP and subtypes where you have hair loss. These are all great questions, by the way. Thank you. I get excited. I speak really fast. I'll try and slow down a little bit. If I can like drill into something too, if you want to get more specific about anything that I'm saying, just fire in something in the chat and I'll slow down. Okay, two good questions. Cortisone. Why does my KP disappear when using cortisone? Well, I mean that's lucky for you for sure. I've used cortisone on my KP before, and it might have had a little bit of an effect, but it wasn't anything too profound. I mean, any sort of anti-inflammatory steroids, I feel like they get often prescribed by dermatologists. My KP was pretty severe when I was growing up, so I've been prescribed a number of different corticosteroids, and they never had a huge effect on me. I'm glad that I didn't stick with them for too long because I've seen some really rough steroid withdrawal, experiences. But it can reduce inflammation. I mean, it really, again, it depends on your individual hormonal equilibrium, how your KP is developing. It's like, do you have, filigrin mutations, which is filigrin is FLG for short, is a protein that helps to develop the cohesiveness of the skin barrier on the stratum corneum. Um, so there's a number of different factors that can lead you into this intersection of symptoms that develops keratosis pilaris. If steroids are working, well for you at down regulating certain inflammatory markers, then you could see an improvement. Other people like myself would not see the same improvement, probably because our pathologies are slightly different and how we're developing these follicular disorders. Let's see. What are lesional versus non-lesional KP? I'm just learning about these terms. Yeah, so I've been regurgitating these terms for a while because I think it's an easy way to describe the difference in how KP manifests on the skin. But really, it comes down to a couple of key tipping points and symptoms. So non-lesional KP is typically described as you don't have this the lesion, the keratin bump that develops on the surface of the skin. Instead, you're looking at more of perifollicular inflammation, which you can it'll be referred to as erythema, which is a redness or inflammation around the follicle, but you're not seeing that same keratin scale build up. The other thing that was discovered, this is I think it was a 2000, so 2012 or 2015 study. They found that keratin scale buildup in the follicle really only occurs at like a higher severity level when you lose sebaceous gland function. So you don't have sebum helping to regulate the not only the follicular health of the hair follicle, but also that epithelial barrier that is inside of your follicle. And I have like a maybe this will help. I'll start pointing to this thing. So if you have these are your hair follicles, right? And you have all your vellus hairs on the surface. You have this barrier that's around your follicle. That's your inner follicular barrier. This barrier right here, if you have KP, then this barrier is the like primary mover. That's the first domino that falls. This barrier here has permeability issues that stem from keratinocytes, which are your skin cells that are not secreting lipids as they should. So they are not organizing into this extracellular structure in the right way, and that process, you end up having lipid entombment, where lipids from those cells are not secreting in between the spaces of this epithelial barrier, which provides gaps, which are basically like little holes in your barrier that pathogens, allergens, and things like that can traverse into, and then you end up seeing that inflammatory response because your immune system's like, oh, there's an invader in the follicular barrier. We need to send blood flow to the follicle. We need to start sending all of these different immune cells into this area to start killing off whatever pathogens are in this follicle. But the issue here is that it becomes a chronic condition because this follicle has permeability issues, along the entire epithelial barrier. So you just have persistent chronic redness, constantly, bothering you there. That is going to exhibit itself as redness around, the follicle at the surface. And then you're also going to see that post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, which is if that inflammation ever ends up dying down, you are sometimes left with like a darkening or hyperpigmentation of the surrounding area. So you have this like interspersed red dots, and then you'll have maybe like some slightly darker dots, and it culminates in this like visible dotted appearance on your skin, right? Now, that's non-lesional KP. When you're talking about lesional KP, you have these things called sebaceous glands, which are like, if you can see, it's like these groupings on the sides of the follicles. In lesional KP, these sebaceous glands are atrophied. They're shriveling up and they're not producing sebum, at least not at the same rate that you would expect to see in a healthy follicle. And so when sebum decreases, you end up drying out this follicle even further because there's cholesterol, fatty acids, lipids, and peptides in here that regulate your microbiome within your follicular barrier, but also on the surface of your skin. Um, when you lose the sebaceous gland function, that is the tipping point, at which point all of the corneocytes, which are these dead stratified skin cells on the epithelial barrier, they start producing a bunch of scale, and that scale ends up building up into a bulge, which you eventually see as a bump on the surface of the skin. Combined with all of these barrier defects in the inflammatory response, you have now red or pigmented bumps on the skin. That is lesional KP. There is a tactile feeling on the skin from it, and you also are exhibiting an additional symptom, which is sebaceous gland atrophy. I don't know if that helps clarify, but that's how we're classifying these two different things, right? Because they are more or less the same condition. It's just one side of this has more symptoms, more breakdowns of regulatory processes in the skin, and non-lesional has less. But it doesn't mean that it's any harder to or any less hard to treat because you're still dealing with this interfollicular barrier permeability issue. Let's see. Do you know why? Oh, we already covered that. Light hair. Okay, so lactic acid. Hi, April. Thanks for joining. Mm. So let's talk about that a little bit. Um, are you all familiar with there's a couple of terms here, but alpha hydroxy acids and beta hydroxy acids. This is um this is something that I can talk about for a long time, so I'll try to be a little bit more brief with it. But you have different topicals. These things have been prescribed since. I mean, this is like going on almost a century of skincare around keratosis pilaris, follicular disorders. But you essentially have these acids, alpha hydroxy acids, and lactic acid specifically has a higher molecular weight, which means it sits on the surface of the skin rather than being likely to penetrate down into the follicular canal here, or intracellular, going in between all of the skin cells. So instead, it kind of sits up on top, and it will break down the tight junctions and bonds that hold those keratinocytes together, which allows them to shed off. They go through a process of desquamation. So, lactic acid is an alpha hydroxy acid. It's helping to break down that surface texture. It can also help with just in general skin turnover, because if you break down that surface level of the skin and you start reducing that stratum corneum, then you end up stimulating more of the basal cells that are along here at the connection between the epidermis and the dermis, and they'll start proliferating and they produce more skin cells faster. So you end up having faster skin cell turnover, which I included specifically in the topicals that I've been formulating at the lowest possible concentration that's still effective at a pH balance because I wanted to induce more cellular turnover. So that way, as we are also supplementing with raspberry ketone to stimulate IGF-1 production in the skin, that it might end up producing results faster. As you can see, a lot of people won't stick with a skin treatment or a skincare regimen for longer than usually like a few weeks. And if we're dealing with trying to treat something that is more on like a monthly or bi-monthly, check-in, it's like the timeline's longer. I was looking at how I could reduce that timeline in order to speed up cellular turnover, so that way you could get more barrier improvements in a shorter time frame. I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to go about it, but I was trying to make this something that was a little bit more, responsive and more skin types. Other acids that you've probably heard of, glycolic acid has a lower molecular weight, so that's alpha hydroxy acid that's good at penetrating down into the skin. It also can be more irritating because of that. Beta hydroxy acids, really the big one you're going to hear about is salicylic acid, which salicylic acid has its place, right? I don't think salicylic acid is good for leaving on the skin as a topical because it is oil soluble and it can cut oil, which if you think back, we were just talking about this, your sebaceous glands are atrophying. You no longer have that skin oil, that sebum that's helping your follicle and protecting your skin. If you leave a bunch of salicylic acid on your skin and that is cutting through all of those lipids that your body is already struggling to produce, you can end up seeing an increase in inflammation, and overall, it is probably not the best type of acid for you to put on your skin. However, it is also not typically as irritating in shorter spurts. So, like if you're using a salicylic acid body wash, it's really good at penetrating down into the follicle where that keratin scale has accumulated, and it can help break some of that up. I think it's really good for that. I just want to leave it on my skin for a prolonged time. If you have dry skin or KP specifically. Oh, let me see. Let me see if I can activate. Everybody just bear with me too, because this is my first time messing around with a YouTube live stream. So I'm probably not the best at all of this, but I am trying to get better. Let's see. Um, Captions. Can I can I set up captions while the stream is going, I guess is the question. That might have to be the for the next stream maybe if I can't figure it out, which in that case I do apologize. That's a good point though. Hold on. Maybe I have a way to do it. Okay, so there's a caption certification. I know we all get so used to using captions all the time. I think TikTok has broken my brain that way. I just expect to see captions on all of my media now. Doesn't look like I can. Yeah, if you know of a way, post it in the chat and I'll try it. Otherwise, I doubt that I'm going to be able to set it up, at least on this stream. Cool. Um, so yeah, these are all great questions, by the way. Yes, I have a couple of recordings going on here. I have a recording here, and then I have a secondary camera set up. My first recording I did on the webinar did not come out very well. The audio was really bad, so that was the reason I didn't post it. But I'll try and post this one. I think I fixed it by getting this, fancy microphone. We shall see. As I try to get some of this messaging out here. Really, I mean, I don't know how many of you know me either. I'll do a quick introduction. Just so you can get a little bit more background on me. But I'm somebody who's just been really invested in uh, KP Keratosis Pilaris research for a long time. I've had the condition my entire life. My son has the condition. It's something that like so many different people, on these subreddits. There's a Facebook group that I'm a part of. I've been on other like message boards and forums over the years. Before I was on Reddit, I think I started on Reddit probably around like 2010. Was right after Dig, if anybody remembers Dig. But I've just been trying to find different groups where people were talking about this skin condition because there just isn't a lot out there for KP. And in a weird way, I feel like a lot of people want to just kind of push it to the side. Like, yeah, it's benign. It's not going to kill you. You'll be fine. Just kind of get over it. It's a cosmetic thing, whatever. But the more I've gotten into talking with people about this condition, especially over the past couple of years with the subreddit with our keratosis, um, I mean, well, yeah, it's a benign condition, but it definitely impacts people's emotional health, their mental health, their body image. I know it did for me, and I know it's definitely affected a ton of other people that way. It's such a prevalent condition for it to not have, I think, a bigger um, like a more interest in it, right? And I got really tired of going to so many different dermatologists that were essentially saying that you can't really do anything for it. It's genetic, and I'm like, well, why is it genetic? Where are the underlying like mechanisms that are causing this to happen to my skin? Because it's debilitating in so many different ways, like socially, emotionally, like we were talking about. So, uh, it was, I think, out of that frustration, I started diving into research, and this was like early 2000s where I was getting books from the library. I was reading through like dermatology books and trying to understand what was going on with my skin. And it's just progressed from there. But over the last like 10 years, there's a ton of research that has come out around not only like just different skin barrier functions, but really around like immunotherapies. There's a lot of research going on right now around different like peptides that I think are super, super promising. All of that just started to culminate I've invested so much interest in this that I started to see these patterns that were emerging around insulin and insulin growth factor, around certain peptides and immune responses, things like antimicrobial peptides, IBFP5, which I think is another super promising therapeutic avenue for treating follicular disorders. And I started to realize that there were a lot of different components out there that would affect uh, the activation of specific genes. Like with endarubin, there are specific activations of FLG that are beneficial to the skin. With IGF, there are obviously a ton of different related enzymes and signaling pathways that get triggered if you are, introducing ways to regulate these different substances in the skin. So over time, I started to realize I was like, well, there's this kind of huge unexplored area and how we could be approaching follicular disorders. And we all know how alpha hydroxy acids work. We all know like vitamin A derivatives, so retinol, retinoids. Those get prescribed a lot. We know that there's effects on the skin. Yes, you can smooth the skin, but how do you suppress the inflammation? How do you reduce the pigmentation? And how do you get yourself to a point where your skin is more presentable, where you can feel not as worried about going different places, like you're not having to think, well, should I wear a long sleeve shirt, to go to the gym or to this dinner? If there's going to be like activities that are outside, am I going to be sweating the whole time because I'm wearing, like some sort of weird, ill-fitting baseball shirt to cover up my KP? And obviously, I've experimented a ton of different things on myself. I've done different topical hormones over the years. I was trying low concentration DHEA to see how it affected lipid synthesis in my skin. I've tried out different peptides. Funny enough, you can buy peptides for research purposes. I wouldn't put them into a skincare product at this point, but there are things that you can do to experiment. And it's again, I'm not recommending this to anybody. These are just things that I have done personally and trying to investigate this particular follicular disorder. Um, but there are, I think, much better ways to approach Keratosis Pilaris that are just not being explored for whatever reason. And so I figured if I could make some sort of splash, if I could put out some of these ideas, and I'm realizing it's going to be more of a process, getting a lot of this out there, but just making it more commonplace that if somebody's going to their dermatologist and they're like, yeah, maybe I have a filigree disorder, that affects 35% of people with this condition, or maybe I'm having, this could be a related back or a complication of my PCOS. or maybe super importantly, maybe I should not be prescribed, isotretinoin or Accutane for my KP because that downregulates sebaceous gland function significantly, and that could end up increasing my severity and spread of this condition that I'm already dealing with. So just things of that nature that I'm trying to put out there. So I'll pause there before I ramble too much. Yes. So while tackling KP, reducing the bumps, what can I use for hyperpigmentation from the scars and picking? It's probably not going to show up very well on camera here, but like my skin, if you can see it, I've been obviously using this formula I've developed for a really long time, but I have like little pitting and scarring from picking at the keratin lesions over, you know, years and years and years. It's hard to reduce that scarring. The pigmentation is also something that takes a long time to go away, uh, just because your melanocytes are more down like in that basal area of your skin, and it's just like it's a longer process of trying to exfoliate and get the pigmentation to turn over in the skin. But scarring is tough. Scarring is a tough one to fix. There are scar creams out there that you could try. I've never seen, like, any improvement on them. I think that part I might just have to accept from the damage I did to my skin all throughout high school and then into, adulthood, so oh, you could I mean, there is another option, which obviously I'm a little, tattooed up here, but you can tattoo over scarring, and that makes it pretty, indistinguishable. That will also hide a lot of your pigmentation, but only if you're, blasting over the entire thing with color. If you get like a black and white tattoo, it's probably still going to peek through. But I've seen a number of people talk about that. Where like, I'm so sick of my KP, I'm just going to get tattooed up. And it's like, well, if that's what you want, that's also a choice, right? You're also changing your the way you look. So um, there are options, I suppose. But if you just want clear skin and you have a bunch of scars from picking at your skin from however long, you could try acid peels. You could try things like that to lessen some of the scarring, but I don't think it'll ever fully go away. Yeah. So, geez, I feel like we've touched on a few things already. Been jumping through this. Yeah, I'm hoping, fingers crossed. I'm gonna try and promote these a little bit more as I've moved through this, and I have some content for TikTok that I'm gonna be putting out for Instagram and other areas to talk more about this stuff, which I think will hopefully help people to start to conceptualize the skin condition as a barrier issue. Um, oh, thanks for joining, Sarah. Yeah, go for it. Ask me any questions you would like about chemical peels. Down to chat. Um, But yeah, I have a lot of messaging that I need to get out. Obviously, a number I've seen, different comments and things. Everything these days feels like a grift, or it feels like people are just throwing ads and stuff at everybody, and I'm trying to not have that be my output in the way I'm communicating about what this is the research and some of these topicals that I'm trying to put out into the market. I'm trying to take a very research centric, like focused approach where I'm putting out the ideas and people can try to poke holes in what I'm putting out, or they can talk about the theory itself. I think that's the most important part of this. Whether or not this product and all the stuff that I've been doing on the side ends up being successful is kind of more secondary. That's something that I'm using to try and fund different areas of research and to just maybe scare some of these larger cosmetic companies, pharmaceutical companies into being like, "Oh, hey, maybe we should put a little bit more effort into this." Like honestly, even if this ended up being a situation where some larger, cosmetic company or like Neutrogena comes in and they're like, We're gonna take all this guy's stuff that he's put together, but we're gonna develop a super solid, just amazing topical that hits all of these different barrier functions and everything." Like the end goal that I have here is just improving KP treatment. So however that happens is good by me as long as it happens. Let's see. Do you think the VI peel would be good to try? Oh, thanks. Thanks for the kind words. Yeah, so I'd ask a couple of different there's a lot of different peels, there's a lot of different lasers. I know people will sometimes think or turn to, like, a higher acid percentage. So, you start out I mean, I used to think this way too, so I'm not, like, knocking anybody for approaching this in this way, but, you put some sort of acid on your skin or your first, like, exfoliating, paralytic, and you see some improvement, but not enough, and you're like, "Okay, well, if I saw some improvement from a little bit of acid, maybe I'll see a lot of improvement from a lot of acid." And, while it will affect your texture because you are essentially breaking down all of these tight junctions between skin cells in your stratum corneum, and then those are all sloughing off, which is going to give you this nice smooth barrier under or a nice smooth skin underneath, texture wise. That acid is also going to be doing things like stripping sebum, moisture from your skin. You're opening up your skin to more dryness, like I've done acid peels before where I felt really tacky afterwards, and it's hard to come back from that. Over exfoliating with KP, since this is a follicular issue and it's not like atopic dermatitis, it's not eczema where you're dealing specifically with that follicle and that follicular scale that's built up there. I think a lot of times you end up seeing improvement really rapidly from peels because it basically shears off the texture issues that you're dealing with. But then eventually that texture comes back, right? Because it's chronic. So in my mind, when I was looking at different treatments and how I could affect things based off of this research I had compiled, my focus has always been on how can we improve the barrier to prevent keratin accumulation or corneocyte shedding in the follicle versus trying to just dissolve away all of that texture. Um, Gotcha. See, also I forgot non-lesional KP and hyperpigmentation from it. Yeah, so the acid peels, they could have some like ancillary benefits around reducing, you know, I guess texture from scarring. They can be helpful for hyperpigmentation too. But I think again, when you come back to it, it's like, where is the hyperpigmentation coming from in your skin? Why is it developing? It's a lot easier to prevent hyperpigmentation from ever occurring in the skin than it is to try and exfoliate it away. So if we're looking at where the pigmentation comes from, well, it's coming from a reaction to the inflammatory response around that follicle. And then after that subsides, you're left with that darkened pigmentation. So really, it all comes back to how do we prevent the inflammation from occurring? And if we can prevent the inflammation, then we prevent the post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, thereby reducing the overall visibility of your KP. So that's the direction I went on it. Can you still try, acid peels? 100%. I've done them. I just don't think that the kind of like the trauma that you inflict on your skin with these high percentage, high concentration acid peels is like the juice is not worth the squeeze for me personally. If you find that it's super successful for you, then like who am I to say that it's not a great treatment, right? But I wouldn't recommend it to people, especially if they haven't dabbled with other topical acids before, because it is just a, a more intense application and treatment. But my focus on hyperpigmentation, honestly, has just been how do you prevent hyperpigmentation so that way your skin over its due course will end up shedding off some of the pigmentation that you're seeing in your skin. And then eventually you see a lessening. The issue with that is that you have to stay so consistent and you have to make sure that you are improving that barrier formation over the course of months and not weeks because hyperpigmentation is something that it can take years to reduce, really severe hyperpigmentation, if at all. Um, and there's some ancillary benefits that I haven't really talked a lot about with raspberry ketone, specifically in a topical application, because raspberry ketone in a topical application, as it's broken down in the skin, actually has some effects on reducing heavy pigmentation. It's not going to like change your skin tone or something like that, right? But it's going to effectively reduce or break up some pigmentation in if you're dealing with hyperpigmentation, which I saw as like a side benefit. It's not like super super effective, but it definitely can improve that situation a little bit. So it was another reason for the ingredients that I've been using in my topical formulations. So yeah, acid peels are one way. Another thing that I see a lot of buzz about is different types of retinoids, retinol, vitamin A derivatives. So a couple like terms, there's like 5 terms that I think are really important to get familiar with if you're really wanting to dive deep, down this rabbit hole around just epidermis and subcutaneous skin conditions in general. There's proliferation, so that's how quickly your keratinocytes or your skin cells will multiply and create new skin cells, right? There's differentiation, and differentiation is when you have a skin cell. Let's say you just went through proliferation, you have a new skin cell. Differentiation is how that skin cell changes over the course of its life. So it's going to start out as a young cell, and eventually it's going to harden, flatten, become a corneocyte from its keratinocyte state, and that's going to be that outer layer, your stratum corneum, the top layer of your epidermis that you can feel, like if you're running your hand up and down your arm right now. Those are all of your corneocytes that have flattened and died. They've gone through that process of differentiation. Survival is another one. Cell survival, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but it's like apoptosis. Apoptosis, I think, is how you say it. It's a way of cell self-deleting. So, like, if you get a sunburn, and your cell needs to die off because it's been damaged in order to prevent, skin cancer, it'll go through that survival mechanism and it'll shut itself down. Migration is another one, how cells move throughout the strata or the layers of the epidermis. Um, and so those are like the key components of like a skin cell as it moves upwards through these like top 50 layers of your epidermal skin cells. And then you also have inflammatory or immune response, which is the innate response that comes from your skin. So your keratinocytes do have a very crucial component in your overall immune response in skin regulation. So if you're talking about anything to do with KP, those 5 terms, proliferation, differentiation, survival, migration, and inflammation, those are kind of like your core areas that you want to focus on when looking at the behavior of skin cells as it relates to the pathology of an interfollicular barrier deformation. So just throwing that out there because that's I feel like a good way to start diving into this particular condition and how you can research it. So, sorry, I'm getting off a track here, but coming back to vitamin A derivatives and retinol and retinoids. Um, what is it? I'm gonna mispronounce this too. Adapalene. It's brand name's Differin. I know a lot of people have probably tried that too for their KP, but there are other ones out there. You got tretinoin. Obviously, isotretinoin is your systemic version, which is another vitamin A derivative. That's Accutane. All of these different uh, treatments and medications interact with your skin based on differentiation. And so it makes sense, I think, from like a top-down approach where you're looking at the skin cells that form that epithelial barrier around the follicle, and you're seeing that some of those cells are not secreting lipids, they're not differentiating correctly. And as a result of that, you have those lamellar gaps in the barrier where you have really the genesis of the inflammatory skin condition. And so I think for dermatologists, I mean, been prescribed this a number of times. I've tried different topical retinoids on my skin. Um, their thought process on this was, okay, if we speed up the differentiation of those skin cells, maybe we end up refreshing the skin quickly enough that not only does it get rid of the keratin scale, but it improves the overall barrier cohesion by stimulating differentiation as those cells move through, those different stages of differentiation, proliferation, and then eventually desquamation, which is when the cell gets sheared off and it sheds off of your skin. I think in a large part that makes a lot of sense until you start thinking about, okay, well, is it what's the actual issue here? Is it differentiation that's the problem? Is it the morphogenesis of how that barrier is being created and formed? Is that more of the issue there? Or specifically, is it something called proteases, which are these mediators? Again, another protein that is regulated through a number of different functions in the skin that determine where those lipids end up between those intercellular bonds. And when you start looking at some of that stuff, retinol, retinoids, vitamin A becomes less compelling because you start to realize that, oh, there's other components here that I think are a little bit more compelling than just improving the rate of differentiation. And also, I don't know about anybody else here, but like some people seem to have some decent results from using things like Tret. For me, it definitely smoothed my skin out, but my skin was so red and irritated from using different topical retinoids that I just haven't ever gone back to it. And then, of course, you have the sebaceous gland atrophy component of that too, where if you're using, a really intense vitamin A derivative, or you're using isotretinoin and it's systemic, you start to shrivel up all those sebaceous glands artificially through this treatment, which it might improve the rate of differentiation. But as soon as you stop that treatment, that keratin scale is going to accumulate so much faster because you no longer have that sebum production in the interfollicular canal. So different treatment options, but some of them are kind of double-edged swords. We talked a little bit about vitamin D earlier. Swimming in the ocean, you get some sun, and your KP improves. Vitamin D also affects something called the VDR. It's another pathway that it's used for triggering uh, differentiation stages in the skin, but it does so in I think a different mechanism than say vitamin A, because it's doing something as a calcium trigger that essentially is telling the skin cells beneath the stratum corneum to begin going through the process of differentiation. So, if you ever wanted to try something else too, you could look into vitamin D topicals. I probably would try looking for like one of the lowest concentration vitamin D topicals. I wouldn't ever recommend like getting sunburns to improve your KP because it's not healthy. But you can try D3 analogs. It's something I'll probably post about here in the coming week. Just alternatives to improving effectiveness of some of the different treatment options that I put out. It's not going to be for everyone though, because vitamin D also has its own kind of negative effects too. It can downregulate sebaceous gland production, just like vitamin A, but maybe not to the same degree. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag. It's hard to figure out where the tolerance level of a person's skin is versus like the effective treatment. You have to count the pros and the cons whenever you're trying something. So it might be worth exploring for some people. Another thing that I would point out too, I've seen this trend a lot. Especially there's a KP Facebook group that I'm not sure how many people are super familiar with. There's like roughly I don't know about 25,000 people on there, so it's similar in size to the R keratosis subreddit. But there was a trend for a long time of people putting something called pseudo cream onto their Keratosis Pilaris, which is like a rash ointment. It's like this heavy paste, and it has zinc oxide in it. I found this to be really just kind of funny and interesting because zinc oxide can reduce inflammation, but it is also a core component in IGF-1 uptake. So I just find it interesting that there's so much interplay amongst all these different things that people have tried and different fads over the years and trying to treat KP. That zinc oxide or taking a zinc supplement or applying some sort of zinc on your skin, that people were seeing positive effects of it when that is something that upregulates insulin growth factor 1, which has been kind of a key component of what I've been trying to get out there. So, yeah, anyways, a lot of different things. I can talk obviously forever about this. Let me take a pause here, and if anyone else has additional questions or if I can expand on anything, just throw it in the chat. Take a quick break here. Oh, something else I've been looking at. I need to. Um, I have a repo that has a bunch of these different research articles in it that I will be putting out soon. To figure out a way to share that, but I'll probably announce that on Reddit once we get closer. Let's see, did I miss anybody that had questions in here? Hakuna Matata. I'll work on the subtitles for you for sure. Trying to figure out how often I can do these. Maybe this will be like a bi-weekly thing or something like that. We'll see. We'll see how much engagement we get over time. Oh, here was one. I noticed that my skin is sensitive to water. Is that because of dryness? Yeah. All right. Probably the biggest misconception around KP I hear that this is like the most common thing you hear when someone's like, "Do you have KP? Do you have keratosis pilaris? Or these rough, dry bumps on the back of your arms? Do you know that it's caused by overproduction of keratin?" Or let's say your skin is producing too much keratin, which I think is like not a great way to describe what's happening at all. Because in a lot of instances, your skin's probably underproducing some keratin filaments that are required for barrier cohesion, especially at like the stratum granulosum and stratum corneum level, where that lipid lamellae, that fat barrier is that goes around your follicles. I think, and I feel like I have a lot of evidence to back this up, that your follicles and that development of keratin scale is two parts. One is how dry your skin is, and the other part is the organization of those corneocytes and how they are shedding, which is another area, something called proteases that they regulate how your skin sheds within the follicle, and both of those are impacted, and I believe there's a good body of evidence showing that those are impacted in people with keratosis pilaris that also play into the interplay of all these different hormones, peptides, and proteins that are regulating skin cell function. So what I believe happens is that when you are building up scale within the follicle, you have something called transepidermal water loss that happens. That is moisture that is inside your body, leaving your body through the skin, through those lamellar gaps in the barrier around the follicle. And when you have water loss like that, it dries out the skin, and those corneocytes, which are already going to be inhibited in function, end up clumping together because of the downregulation of these proteases that you end up having these clumps of scale that are just getting stuck inside of the follicle. Typically, it's up closer up here, not so much down to the hair bulge, but right in this area, which conveniently is right around your sebaceous glands. And that scale ends up clumping and accumulating over time. And then if you lost that sebaceous gland function, then you're again losing more of the fats and the cholesterol that keeps all of that moisture inside. So lose sebaceous gland function, transepidermal water loss increases. There is more dryness. The scale accumulates faster. You end up having this impacted infundibular plug that builds up in the follicle, and then you have that bump. So, yeah, think about things that cause skin dryness. It's we're getting out of winter time here, but I'm in Colorado. It's super, super dry out right now. You have air humidity drop. That means more moisture is being pulled up out of your skin. That increases the skin dryness in the follicle. That means more corneocytes are likely to become impacted in here, and you end up seeing an increase in severity in the dry months of the year. Um, Another reason why I've been telling people is like it's a great idea just to use moisturizer all the time on your KP. It's not like a once a day thing. You shouldn't, not even just like in the mornings or in the evenings. Like I put lotion on my skin constantly. I have a little bottle. I'll use like Jergens Ultra Healing. I have like whatever the Vaseline brand is. It's like a semi-occlusive lotion that I use sometimes if it's really really dry out. CeraVe's fine. I use that too. I'm always kind of questioning like how much what the ceramide content actually is within CeraVe because I've dabbled a lot with ceramides, and I'm not wholly convinced that CeraVe is the best ceramide lotion, but it is cheap and I can get it in bulk. So yeah, it's anything that you can continuously apply to help moisturize the skin is going to reduce the likelihood of corneocyte clumping within the interfollicular canal. What do you think of the Glytone KP kit, especially for non-lesional KP? Glytone's KP kit was the first thing that I ever got prescribed from a dermatologist that um, diagnosed me with KP. This was probably like, jeez, I don't know. It was like 1999, 98, somewhere in there. It was a long time ago. It was probably not too long after Glytone started producing their KP kit. Um, Glycolic acid has its place in helping, remove the keratin buildup, that accumulates in the follicle. Like we were talking about earlier, it has a lower molecular weight, so it's gonna penetrate deeper into the follicle and help break some of that up. But I think it is, probably a little bit too irritating for a lot of people's skin types. So it's hard to say. A lot of this is trial and error when you're talking about acids, and you also have a period of tolerance. So, like I've noticed this too. A lot of people using acids for the first time on their skin, especially with lactic acid, but the same for glycolic acid, is that the first time you put on your skin, you see some improvements for a few days, and then all of a sudden you have like this explosion in inflammation, or you feel like you've backtracked a lot, and it's your skin is essentially responding to a lot of the topical acids that you're putting onto it. So you have to build up a tolerance over time. At this point, I feel like my skin has insane tolerance because I've been putting acids on it for like the last 20 years. But when you're first starting out with it, Glytone's KP kit I think is a little harsh. They also, if you're talking about the kit I'm thinking about, there's like a body wash and like a shower poof or loofah, whatever you want to call the thing, and then there is a lotion, right? Which if you're just starting out, I think it is much better to gradually increase your overall keratolytics that you're putting on your skin. So that way you are like slowly approaching the peak of your skin's tolerance to alpha hydroxy acids versus doing like the super fast ramp up where it's much more likely you're going to over exfoliate or you're going to cause some sort of inflammatory response that's going to kind of inhibit any sort of success you might have had from those topicals. Not to say that Glytone's KP kit isn't good. I mean, it's definitely they're marketing what's in it. It's very effective, and they make some extremely strong glycolic acid exfoliating body lotions that I think are good to have on the market because they can help break down some like really tough follicular disorders. But it probably glycolic acid is never like the first acid I would direct someone towards, I think, when trying to deal with KP. It's something I might move down the line after they've tried a couple of other things. But again, everyone's a little bit different. Some people have put insane high levels of like urea. That's one thing that's always baffled me. You have like a 40% urea cream that's meant to like tear down roughness on your heels. People put it on their KP and they're like, yeah, this is great. And I'm like, I could never tolerate that in a million years. My skin would be so upset with me. So it just depends. Your mileage may vary. I think that's pretty true on a lot of this. A lot of it's trial and error too. That's a tough part in trying to distribute a new type of skincare product too. A topical is like you have to make it the concentration is effective enough that there's going to be some sort of results, but you can't have the thing be too harsh because then people are not going to be able to tolerate it with their skin. So it's like finding that balance in there is a very difficult process when developing any sort of formula directly targeting barrier impairments or follicular issues and keratin buildup. All right, we've been going for about an hour. I don't know. Hopefully, some of this is, beneficial to you. If there's other areas, I mean, I can drop in specific research articles. I can put in, sources into the chat if you wanted to take any of that with you. If you want to ask me where I'm getting some of this information, I definitely welcome that. You should never trust someone, randomly off the internet. Like, ask me for sources. I will give you the evidence. I will give you what I'm basing all of this off of, so you can make your own determinations on what you want to do for your own skincare routines. This is not none of this is me prescribing anything to you or telling you how to approach any of this. I just want to make sure that everyone is enabled with the information that they need to better approach the skin condition. Yeah, this will be interesting. I'm definitely not the most like extroverted person ever, so trying to get yourself out on the internet is a interesting process for sure. See how my I'm assuming my content is going to be pretty rough in the beginning, so just bear with me as I get better at all this stuff. Let's say there's a couple of other areas that I was going to talk about. If anyone has any, unless there's a specific topic you want to jump into, but I've been very interested in cytokines and some specific like regulatory processes with inflammation. I can also talk to you. I mean, if there's no other topics here, I'm happy to talk a little bit about some of the projects that I'm working on right now, and what I'm being enabled to do, just from the overwhelming, honestly, response to putting out Smooth KP in this product. It's been wild. This past month has been really really interesting. I've had, obviously there's a gradient. I have some like really solid success stories. I have people that are seeing improvement now at like 2 to 4 weeks. And then you have some people that aren't seeing any sort of improvement, and then you have some people who are not tolerating the lotion as much as they had hoped. And so I'm looking at this like gradient and tracking all of these different kind of anecdotal experiences that people are having with raspberry ketone and the subsequent IGF stimulation, as well as endarubin. And it's giving me some really interesting insights. One thing I'll point out that I think is really, really interesting, and I'm taking it as a net positive, even though it probably doesn't seem like that to the people that are using this lotion. But there's been a few people, specifically with KPRF, and I know someone was asking a little bit about KPRF in the chat, where they had applied the lotion, and for like the first 4 or 5 days, they saw a rapid decrease in flushing and their overall baseline redness improving, which is like, that's great, right? You're making progress. Any sort of positive progress is awesome. But then after that, they see a return, and the inflammation comes back, and the overall results are not maintained. After those like 4 days, and then they are getting discouraged and kind of going back, and they're wondering about like bounce back redness, things of that nature. I can't say specifically what's happening, but I have an inclination that there is kind of two major things going on with KPRF, and I'm really excited. I'm working on something right now that I'm hoping to release in the coming months, if not sooner, which is a formula that will be specifically for the face for KPRF, that is going to kind of navigate around some of these issues. So what I think can happen for some people, and this is an area of improvement, I think that'll be something that I'll expand upon in a future release. But the way that raspberry ketone actually stimulates insulin growth factor 1 production in the skin is through something called, it's a ganglion root neurons. It's sensory neurons in your skin. Those sensory neurons that you feel temperature, pressure, things like that. Those are the same neurons that are being stimulated by raspberry ketone. So when that molecule of raspberry ketone is absorbed, interfollicularly, and it ends up getting to the those sensory neurons, they release something called CGRP, which is a peptide, another messenger peptide. So, if you're not familiar with this stuff, I mean, like a peptide is a little branch of amino acids. It's a protein, and that protein is going to move through this microenvironment of your skin to dock with these receptors on different cells, and that elicits a response. Well, CGRP is being secreted from these sensory neurons, and these sensory neurons only have so much CGRP, like, in their reserves and in the cell itself, that it can secrete at any given time. So this was a question I got from a lot of people. They're like, well, if I just take a bunch of raspberry ketone and put it all over me, isn't that going to have better results? And it's like, well, no, it's probably actually going to have worse results. And the reason for that is because raspberry ketone stimulates and is very effective at stimulating these sensory neurons, to release the CGRP, to the point that if you use too much of it, you end up getting a CGRP flush. It just dumps all of these peptides into your skin. And then that sensory neuron then has to replenish and build back up those peptides. And so what you would get is you'd get this flush of all of these peptides that are going to have effects on morphogenesis of the skin barrier. It's going to upregulate IL-10, which is the inflammatory regulator cytokine. Um, and then you're also going to have, these positive effects on sebaceous gland function. You're going to see positive effects on proliferation of the skin cells. So there's all these things that are happening with IGF-1, and you start to see some sort of like, improvement over the course of, well, like 126 hours or whatever, those 4 days. You start seeing this up ramp and improvement in the skin condition, and then it falls off. Well, my theory that I'm working on right now is that you end up seeing this improvement because all these peptides are being released. Those are going down to your progenitor cells, your basal cells, and those are secreting all of your IGF-1 into your skin. You're seeing some net positive from the IGF-1 stimulation, and then the IGF-1 stimulation just falls off a cliff because all of those CGRP peptides from your sensory neurons have dried up. You've overstimulated them, and then you're basically back to ground zero, where you're waiting for those sensory neurons to build back up that peptide balance, so that way you can stimulate them again to get those peptides out again to have this cascading effect in the skin. So an area that I've been focused on with this has been, all right, how much of this do we need to stimulate those sensory neurons effectively? And then how much of it can we use on a continuous basis to have like uh, a consistent increase in IGF-1? Um, and so that's been a focus area. I think though, with some people, and because it hasn't been everybody, but there's definitely certain people are seeing some sort of rapid decrease in flushing, and their skin feels cool and everything is improving, and then it goes back to the way it was. I think it's because we are not being consistent enough of on that like ramp up timeline. We need to have consistent CGRP release. So I have I think some really exciting stuff that I'll be putting out around that specifically. And as soon as we get the topicals out, I'm looking for people that have KPRF, that are willing to sign an NDA with me. I will talk through what the topical is, deliver out some of the product itself, the prototype, for people to look at, test out, see if it responds well to their skin. And depending on how the results of those informal trials are, we will end up releasing that as another product that is more specific for facial applications, that doesn't have lactic acid, that is specifically working on the pro-inflammatory cytokine response, and improving overall barrier health, and by having a more consistent and gradual increase in IGF-1 production. Thanks, Beach, for the nice words. Yeah, KP is frustrating. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Um, I mean, it's just tough because nobody's talking about this in this specific way. What I am really excited for, and what I hope happens in the near future, is that I can get somebody, whether it's a molecular biologist or a dermatologist or just somebody, to come in and talk to me about these specific things, because I would really like somebody to challenge what I'm putting out there, and also for us to have like a productive discussion about this. Like if I'm missing pieces of how this is coming together, and I'm not seeing the whole picture somewhere, I would absolutely love it if somebody were to come in that has more knowledge than me about this space, about organic chemistry and molecular biology, that can at least, if something is refuted, then that just means it's a course correction towards the most beneficial answer. So it's an area that I think we'll get to eventually. I have some people I've been talking to. I've been reaching out to a couple of different dermatologists and trying to find the right person that will come in and partner with me on this. It's just there's again, you talk to I've seen hundreds of dermatologists. I flew most recently. I was out in Dallas, Texas, and had went to see some dermatologists there that specialized in KP. And talking through this, I realized that there's just this information is not proliferated out into kind of the overwhelming consciousness of people around, that are focused on fixing these skin conditions. Very much, it's like, well, here's the treatment options. There's keratin scale buildup, so you can use acids, you can use retinoids. Every so often somebody tries to prescribe me Accutane, and I try to talk to them about it, and just like, no, this is not a great solution. Here's why. They'll talk through, maybe some lesser known acids that they'll give me some recommendations on. They'll talk about exfoliating, or every so often I will get or pushed over towards, you should use some sort of like the Alexandrite laser, or what's the other one, YAG, or these different lasers that target capillary the surface capillaries in your skin. Essentially, they disintegrate those capillaries in order to reduce flushing and redness. Those are like, it's just the same playbook really, and I'm trying to figure out how we can move past that to talk about the actual mechanisms of why this condition is manifesting in the skin, and what we can actually do to to push this forward. So, yeah, I'm excited. I feel very optimistic about the future. Obviously, I've made some big strides in my own skin. I feel much more comfortable. Just wearing a T-shirt like this would have been like something unthinkable for me, depending on the day and the season. Just 10 years ago. So there's improvements. I'm seeing other people seeing similar improvements, but I very much prescribe to this continuous improvement ideal, methodology where each time we have one of these lotions that or formulas that we're putting out there, I'm looking at how can we improve the efficacy, how can we make this more tolerable to more people, and what other components can we put out there that will help to give people results in their own skin. Ideally, long enough timeline. There's like a set number of different topicals, and based on your skin type, you pick out which topicals that you think are going to be most effective, and you can trial them on a continuous basis until you find the right number of mechanisms and ingredients that induce gene regulation around things like filaggrin, lipid entombment, skin cell proliferation and differentiation, and morphogenesis, and overall reducing inflammatory response by inhibiting cytokine regulation. Let's see. This is a good question. I was wondering if there are certain cytokines that you think are the most important in the pathogenesis of KP. Yes, I do. I do have a list of individuals that I do not like that I would like to regulate in my skin. I have some reference notes in here. Yeah, so I'll tell you how I think about this. You might conceptualize this in a different way, but the immune response, the innate immune response in your skin, I think of it as like a balancing scale, and you have pro-inflammatory cytokines on one side, and then you have the cytokines that regulate inflammation on the other. And anytime you have a tip between these two messengers, is when you start to see the immune response. You start to see increased blood flow in the capillaries. You see, these immune cells, T cells are coming in to facilitate that immune response, and that's when you get that inflammation. The chronic inflammation is the issue because you never see that inflammation die down because of the barrier permeability issues. So there's two parts to that. One part is like improve the barrier, reduce the amount of pathogens and allergens that can traverse the barrier. You will reduce the immune response innately because there's no longer that stimulus coming through that barrier. So that's one side of it, right? And that's the IGF, insulin growth factor side of it that I think, trying to improve that barrier regulation. On the other side of it, you're trying to suppress these pro-inflammatory cytokines. And so pro-inflammatory cytokines like there's um, there's what is it, IL-1 and IL-6 specifically. I think those two are important to downregulate, and that's another reason why Indirubin or Indigo naturalis is included in this lotion, is because we're trying to prevent those cytokines from delivering that pro-inflammatory message to your immune cells. And then IL-10 is the other big one, where IL-10 is the regulatory cytokine. That's the one that it's essentially ending the inflammatory response. IL-10 is actually upregulated by insulin growth factor 1. So there's, just another convenient indication that insulin growth factor has a very, very crucial role in how the interfollicular barrier and hair follicle is developed. So yeah, there are definitely specific ones. One of the most interesting areas, and this is another thing that I would never be able to do without having some sort of funding to push it, is around antimicrobial peptides. And so these they're called AMPs, antimicrobial peptides. There's a specific one, I believe it is AMP IB. It's IBP. It's a binding protein 5, and that interacts with a number of different receptors. But there's another very very specific receptor that's called LRP1, and those two I think have so many applications in keratosis pilaris, but also in atopic dermatitis. AMPs or antimicrobial peptides are really beneficial in reducing inflammation from research that I've seen. The issue with antimicrobial peptides and why you haven't heard about them just being used wholesale for all sorts of inflammatory skin conditions is they are so difficult to produce. It's really hard to scale up production on it. You're either producing it from cell cultures, or you have to, use a E. coli or other viruses to be able to shear out the peptides. It's hard to produce them. Some peptides you see coming into skincare because they're easier to extract. Like there are peptides you can extract out of seeds or out of plant fibers, or out of bovine or pigs or whatever. Like there's other ways you can extract certain things, but some of these peptides are very specific in their function, and they're very difficult to not only produce, but then after you produce them, how do you keep the peptide stable? How do you stop that little protein chain from breaking down? So, like one of the ways, if you wanted to just blow a ton of money and you're messing around and you ever go onto our peptides, you can buy antimicrobial peptides. It's going to cost you like $480 to get like a milliliter of them, and you're going to have to keep it, probably refrigerated or something. And who knows what the uptake is going to look like, and trying to apply it to your skin. But there is an application there where using amps could be, I think, like next generation anti-inflammatory topicals, um, that would be used for a whole host of different skin conditions, KP included. So yeah, are there specific things that have been identified that are probably really beneficial for different types of skin conditions? Absolutely. Are they readily available? No, they're not. There needs to be more development on how we can produce these peptides at scale, and then how we can introduce them either through phospholipids or other means of delivery into the skin to elicit the response that you want to see. So I don't know if that was the answer that you were looking for, or if that gives you anything to ponder. But short answer is yes. There are specific mechanisms in the skin that I think are much more relevant in the pathology of keratosis pilaris and just inflammatory skin conditions in general. Which, to be fair, like I've commented this once before on somebody's post, but keratosis pilaris is just like the Latin words for spiny follicle. So what does that really tell you? It's like the the taxonomy of how we um, allocate, skin conditions. We're like, okay, this is an inflammatory follicular condition, and we're gonna roll it up underneath keratosis pilaris, and it's gonna be this subtype, right? These inflammatory skin conditions are all very interrelated in so many ways. Whether it's atopic dermatitis, psoriasis, they all have different effects on proliferation, differentiation, survival, and migration. And if you start to mess with any of those different regulatory processes, you end up with a skin condition. I've just been focused on, follicular conditions, but a lot of these things are applicable to a number of different conditions, not just keratosis pilaris. Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad that helped you. Yeah, it's a tough thing. Like, how do I guess I'll just keep expanding my little blog post. I tried to make that blog post honestly a lot more high level, and it ended up being way too long regardless. And I don't know how much of it is being consumed. There's definitely some people that are like, "Oh, why are you using the following ingredients here?" And I was like, "Oh, all right, I need to explain this better because I thought I had a good, thesis going on this, but it's just hard because this stuff it's esoteric. It's difficult to comprehend sometimes, and a lot of it we don't even really fully understand anyways. You'll get to the edge of research on some different immunotherapies, and we'll be like, "Hey, we know these two proteins interact together, we can see the results, but we have no idea what's happening at, like a molecular level, between these proteins." And you'll run into that so often in this research that you're like, okay, so this is really where like the edge of knowledge is kind of being eclipsed. And what we can actually do with these, different proteins is questionable, but I think it's rapidly expanding. Like you hear about immunotherapies for cancer, protein folding and design, and like AI research and things of that nature. Who knows where we're at in another decade with this stuff? And once we figure out how to scale and produce these things in mass, it'll change a lot of different ways that we approach just different diseases in general. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. KPRF is a tough one. I'm very excited to try new things out. If anybody ends up trying like a vitamin D topical, and again, you probably need to like dilute it somehow. A lot of them are really, really strong. Um, and they use it on either their KP or KPRF, reach out to me and let me know what you think of it because I would be very curious to hear your experience. Let's see, we got about another half hour to go here. Are there any other questions from the chat? I'm going to take a quick break here so my voice doesn't fall apart. Or even suggestions too on how to structure these conversations better. If it would be interesting to do like specific topics, I could even run those on like a weekly basis. This is something again that I'm gonna try and put out after the fact on my YouTube channel, and then cutting this up and putting it onto TikTok Reels and that all the different social media um, different different platforms. It's almost like there's a couple of different parts where you want to focus on treatment, and you want to focus on what the treatment is doing, and then you want to focus on the underlying effects and how you're combating them with said treatment. Like trying to figure out how that breaks down and how it's easy to communicate is it's a little bit difficult because this is a complex topic. Inflammation in particular. The more you learn about the immune system, the more you learn that you don't know how the immune system functions. Everything works together in mysterious ways. Even with insulin sensitivity, IGF and IGF-1 and insulin, they share like 50% of the same protein chain. So they're very, very similar molecules. They have very different effects on the follicle and the development of a hair follicle and epithelial barrier. So, in general, you know what? I'll talk a little bit about this. This might finish us out. Unless there's other questions that come up. But uh, treatment recommendations, routine recommendations. Again, just take this as you will. They're not hard and fast truths. These are things that I seem to I've personally had a lot of success with, but I've had dozens and dozens of people reach out to me asking me questions about their routines and regimens, and I've seen positive effects from kind of following certain flows to your routine when it comes to KP. Um, Talking about physical versus chemical exfoliation. So chemical exfoliation is always going to be something that will be pushed over physical exfoliation. The reason for that is when you have these lesions and you're trying to essentially grind those down with a shower mitt or a washcloth or whatever, you'll end up breaking off a lot of the keratin buildup that's at the surface, but you are actuating those infundibular plugs, those blocks of keratin, which in turn ends up irritating them more because you're stimulating them. So physical exfoliation is something that I think a lot of people uh, well, they try it, but they end up saying like, "Oh, I don't know how much this is helping out," or it might be kind of like stepping back from how their skin was beforehand. If you over exfoliate, that's obviously going to be detrimental to your skin. But something I found that's really beneficial has always just been wet exfoliation. So only doing exfoliation when you're in the shower, you're bathing, and using some sort of lubrication during the exfoliation. So whether that's like barrier sensitive body wash, or if you're using like a 2% salicylic acid body wash or something like that, that can help if you're going down that process of doing chemical exfoliation in addition to the physical exfoliation. Both of those things, just doing them wet, making sure that there's not a lot of friction on the skin, I think is very helpful in smoothing out the skin if you're doing any sort of physical exfoliation, and also just making sure that you're doing slow steps. So you don't want to just grind off as much of your skin as you can because it's going to set you back. It's going to end up being, it's a net negative effect on your KP versus doing light, gentle exfoliation over a long period of time, just being patient with your skin and working through those steps and having a gradual approach to the texture that you're trying to elicit from your skin is much more beneficial in the long run. It's just being patient and understanding that changes in your skin take a little bit of time. So that's been really helpful, I think, for a number of people I've talked to. It's just that, and like you don't want to put too much stuff on your skin at the same time. I see people applying like 4 or 5 different acids onto their skin, And again, it's like more is not always better with this condition. I've noticed that myself when been over applying things in the past, and I've been like, all right, I'm trying this urea cream, and then I'm trying this glycolic body wash, and then this thing has lactic acid in it, and then this is like some sort of barrier ceramide cream that I'm putting on there. And at the end, you're just layering all this stuff on, and you might end up just irritating that impaired follicular barrier more so than had you done nothing or just used a plain moisturizer, which is also something funny I've seen a few times where people are like, I just stopped my skincare routine and I've just been using plain lotion and my KP looks better than it did for the last 6 months when I was putting all these topicals on it. So yeah, it's like a slow approach is better. More is not always better. You want to limit how much you're agitating that damaged or impaired barrier, and just try to slowly introduce things. Make sure you're doing it for at least 6 to 8 weeks to determine efficacy, and then going from there, you can take down the frequency of the application of whatever the skincare product is, or take it up a little bit if you think that it has some sort of net benefit. But that's been really helpful for a number of folks. And then outside of that, there are just different things. I know people talk about diet, and it was kind of like a weird topic for a long time because folks would be like, "Yeah, I cured my KP from getting off of gluten," or I started eating, only meat. I've seen there's someone that was like constantly pushing this carnivore diet, saying it would improve your KP. That's such an individualized experience. I've done different diets before that have had no effect on my KP, depending on the mutations and the level of dysregulation in your skin. Your diet may or may not have some sort of impact on your KP, but I know just hearing folks talking about different things like omega 3s. In general, you want to have a healthier diet. In general, it's probably not a bad idea to take like an omega 3. My doctor prescribes it, or tells not prescribes it, but tells me to take it for like heart health and things of that nature. um, all of that to say that, having a healthy diet is going to make it so that overall, if you're just healthier in general, you're going to have better hormonal equilibrium. Your hormones are going to be regulated better. And in general, that's going to give you a better starting point or base to begin improving your skin through other topicals. So while I'm not going to say like diet is a direct, cause and effect for KP, because I don't think it is, it still is an important thing to make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Getting enough sleep is another big one, right? Because all of these hormonal processes that are in your body that are regulating growth hormone, insulin growth factor, androgen hormones, all of that is affected by how well you're taking care of yourself. And if you're not taking care of yourself super well, then it's probably going to have some sort of detrimental effect on the results you're going to achieve through applying topicals. Hey, Zoe, thanks for joining. Have I ever used CeraVe SA Smoothing Cleanser? I have not used that. As like a shower product, like something you use in the shower, or is that just like in general something you can put on your face? Yeah, okay. I'm assuming it's probably like 2%. Most of them are. I don't feel it's pretty rare to see a higher salicylic acid, um, concentrations in products. I think just because it can be more irritating. But yeah, I mean, I haven't used that specific product, but I've used a number of different salicylic acid topicals before, and I've had success with those as long as they're not leave on. I think that they can be really beneficial. It's when you start leaving salicylic acid on the skin, and especially with lesional KP, I don't think that's like a great solution. The fact that some people can tolerate it is pretty wild to me, because I've seen a lot of people in the past, especially like a couple of years ago. Um, I was seeing a number of people asking, well, I was using this CeraVe SA lotion for rough and bumpy skin, and my KP is just like exploded. And then it's increasing in redness and spread too. And I think it's just too harsh, and it's oil soluble. And if you have sebaceous gland atrophy, it's just going to make that condition all the worse. So, but in limited application, limited frequency, you put that salicylic acid on the skin, it can help break up some of that scale. It can improve physical exfoliation because you're essentially allowing you're breaking apart those keratin bonds, and you're allowing your physical exfoliation to sweep away those dead skin cells. So that seems to be a way to improve effectiveness of exfoliation without, scrubbing harder or being more traumatic to your skin. How many times should my daughter exfoliate in the shower? Um, I mean, that's kind of a it depends how often can you do it and tolerate it without causing irritability in your skin is really the question. The more often you do it, the higher the likelihood that you're going to irritate your skin, especially when you have sensitive skin or a damaged skin barrier. Um, but you also, if you do it too little, then you're probably not going to see a whole lot of net benefit from doing it at all. So it's and again, that's kind of a personal journey of trial and error. I would say, um, I mean, everybody has a different routine. I shower every day because I can't go to bed without showering. So I will typically exfoliate, but if I notice that my skin is already feeling, smooth and it's not something that I need to um, that I don't feel like is necessary that evening, then I won't do any sort of exfoliation. I'll just wash, with a barrier sensitive body wash. Um, that's the other thing too, is like you don't have to use the salicylic acid every time you're exfoliating, as long as there's some sort of lubrication that's allowing whatever that exfoliating mitt or shower poof is to glide across the skin without like catching or irritating the skin more. Then I think that can be good. So maybe like you could start out with something like 3 times a week with a salicylic acid body wash that you use, once for that day when you shower, and you use very, very light, very gentle pressure on your skin. And then the other days, the alternate days, you're using like a barrier sensitive Dove body wash or something else, whatever it is that you like that is not going to be stripping your skin. So you don't want to use any harsh soaps or anything like that. But yeah, if you just like try that alternate schedule for a bit, see how the benefits are coming through. If you end up reaching a plateau, then you could introduce an additional day into your routine of physical exfoliation and see how that works. And it's just kind of keeping track of it and making sure you're diligent and consistent, so that way you know where the results are coming from. Yeah, so Dove has these barrier sensitive body washes that I've used. Really, most of them are going to be fine. You just don't want anything that's really harsh. Soap, like salicylic acid, anything that's lipid soluble that's going to break down the oils in your skin is going to have a negative effect, especially on lesional KP, but also just on KP in general. So you want to make sure that you're moving between these things because you want to get the keratin scale out of the follicle to reduce the overall texture, but you don't want to over irritate the follicle and increase inflammation. So, barrier sensitive body washes, any of them, they usually say it on the label, they'll be marketed as such, are not going to have like a high, um, like the soap content. It should like, well, not the soap content, what am I saying, but like the actual, like bottle itself should say something around like it's barrier sensitive. I actually have one I could go grab and like read through some of the ingredients on there, but I've tried a few different ones, and my wife actually has a couple that she's bought that are not Dove that I could find and then post or send over to you. Depends too. If I remember right, if you're over in the UK or EU, it's gonna the products might be a little bit different. So yeah, physical exfoliation. I've seen so many different trends. One of them was people were doing dry brushing. I think dry brushing is probably like the worst way you could exfoliate keratosis pilaris, just because one, there's no lubrication. You're just irritating with like dry bristles or whatever it is, and two, it's like it just seems really uncomfortable. You're like scratching your skin off. I can't imagine. I mean, some people said they had beneficial effects, but I don't know. Cool. Um, yeah, so yeah, I'd just try alternating days to start, and then you can increase or decrease frequency depending on how the skin reacts. Awesome. Really appreciate everyone joining today too. We still got about 20 minutes, so any other questions, comments? Yeah, no problem. Well, thanks for joining. I'm gonna try and I think I'll work on like a bi-weekly or maybe like twice a month. I'll keep doing these live streams in addition to putting out more content to talk about this stuff because I think it's easier to converse about it, I might switch back to doing the webinar too, so people can come up and actually chat. Unless there's a way that I can do that efficiently on YouTube. TikTok Live might be the other way too. I know TikTok Live, you can call people up and they can you can have audio back and forth. That might be the next step and moving this over there to have it be a little bit more interactive. But um, yeah, things that are upcoming. There's a few things that I'm working on that I think will be neat. I will be posting another like research blog pretty soon, so be on the lookout for that. I'm gonna be talking about just like uh, other different symptoms that intersect with KP, other skin conditions that have some sort of likeness with KP. So if we're like looking at a Venn diagram, there's similarities that align between keratosis pilaris and a number of other skin conditions. I've been working on that for a little while. And then as far as Soothe and Restore goes on the lotion, I am looking to just I'm still trying to gather feedback from everybody. I'm using that to iterate on the formulation to improve upon new products that we're releasing. So I'll be sending out some information to anybody that has purchased or tried the formula. You'll be receiving something for me in the coming weeks to provide some sort of feedback, and there will be a discount code that's in there for everybody that's been an early adopter of trying this stuff out. So be on the lookout for that. And yeah, as soon as I get on, I know all these everybody that's had to purchase internationally, the shipping just sucks. International shipping is hard. It's expensive, and I am literally waiting on the last step right now from Amazon to get this out into Amazon's distribution facilities. Which, if you use Amazon to purchase anything, you have Amazon Prime. That will hopefully, you know, be a huge improvement for shipping costs for everybody. So I'm just waiting. As soon as I get the green light on it, I am taking trucks from our warehouse and I'm going down to the nearest distribution facility and giving them all of the units. So that way we can eliminate this international shipping and even domestic too. I mean, domestic's not nearly as bad as international shipping is, but that'll be hopefully something that's coming this month, if not early next month. It just depends. I'm waiting on the approvals. So, but yeah, just a couple of things coming down the pipe. Awesome. Well, we still got another 19 minutes. Is there anything else? I doubt we'll probably be gathering too many more new viewers here, but if there's any other topics, any other questions you have, fire them on over to me. I'll do my best to answer, and then we'll probably wrap this up for today. I definitely think, yeah, having more interaction would be better in the near future. Let me make sure I answered everybody's questions that they had posed. And captions too. I'll work on captions. I will say another thing, just around timeline to results. I'm seeing more and more posts, and I've been receiving more direct messages from different people. A lot of this is on Reddit, but I have a lot of interaction with other folks too. There are number of people in a Facebook group that have been responding to me, but in general, I've been receiving a lot of emails just through my website, um, and I think right now it's really interesting because we're about like 5-ish weeks into this, not quite. So it's been almost a month. And the timeline to results is something, just expectation setting. Uh, I've seen some results already within these 4 weeks that are actually pretty amazing. They're super promising. But I just reminding everybody that, like, if you're looking at raspberry ketone topicals, if you're trying out these other topicals, like, that 6 to 8 week timeline is probably a really good rule of thumb for determining if something is effective. But the overall like effectiveness of that routine and what you can end up actually accomplishing in your own skin is not something that I would measure on a 6 to 8 week timeline. I had put 12 weeks in on the before and after pictures that I have because that was at that point that was like as far as I had seen a plateau. But even after 12 weeks, I was still seeing like just slight, more like things that are probably only noticeable to me, quality changes in my skin tone, lessening irritability. So like these are things that have a longer timeline. You're looking at however many numbers of refreshes in your epidermis before you start to achieve some of these effects that are more long tailed. So anybody that's trying this, if you're at like 4 weeks and you're like, I see a slight improvement, but I'm not really sure. Like, I want to try and promote people to stick with it for like at least another 4 weeks or another 6 weeks, another 8 weeks, because you might end up looking back at it and be like, okay, this is way more of a profound impact that this has had on my skin at like 8 weeks versus 4 weeks. And what I thought was like as good as it was going to get at 4 weeks was definitely not that. That's been my experience. That's been experience that I've had from people in the informal trials that we did before we released this formula. So, yeah, it's like I just hope enough people stick with this long enough, that are seeing this like incremental improvement in the front of the overall skincare routine, that they end up also achieving those long-term results, because the long-term results are, I think, where really once we have like this, here's the first week, here's at 12 weeks, that's where I see like this just huge difference between before and afters, where insulin growth factor, indirubin, these things are able to help quell some of the inflammation and really over time improve the barrier to a point that you have a much more healthy and less irritable skin barrier around the follicles. Oh, this is interesting. When I was first diagnosed, my dermatologist gave me a prescription for skin bleaching cream. I saw a change to around my KP, but not the KP itself. I used only one tube. Do you remember what that was called by chance? I mean, a bleaching cream would detract from some of the hyperpigmentation, but I highly doubt that's going to do anything for your inflammation. So you're still going to have this, this very visible inflammation in the skin. And yeah, so hyperpigmentation, just pigmentation in general in the skin, melanocytes, melanin, the different skin tones that we all have, right? Hyperpigmentation is like a dump of those of melanin into a specific area that is a result of that trauma inflicted on the skin. So that barrier function is broken down. There's pathogens. You have immune response, inflammation. All of your capillaries are flooding, blood circulation into that area as part of that immune response. And then once that retracts enough, you end up left over with this pigmentation. It's like a dot, freckle, or a mark. I think I don't know what the cream was that you're using or what the bleaching cream was, but if it was something that can break up some of the melanin that's in there and help decrease that hyperpigmentation, then yeah, it might have some sort of effect in lightening it. Um, the other way to go around that is to just continue exfoliating and improving your skin barrier, and then ideally over a long enough time period, that barrier is improved. You prevent the inflammation, and therefore you also prevent the hyperpigmentation. So it's really hard. This is one of those things that's so difficult because there's so many different components at play here. But even if you're using a skin bleaching cream, like think about this for a second. You're using a skin bleaching cream or you're using something to eliminate hyperpigmentation in your skin. It could be super effective actually. You could be breaking down all of this hyperpigmentation and lessening it, but at the exact same time, your skin barrier is still defective. You still have an inflammatory, immune response, innate immune response, and post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation would be developing alongside your attempts to decrease pigmentation at the same time. So it's going to feel like your skin is fighting back against anything that you're trying to do in terms of eliminating that hyperpigmentation. So it's like, how far can you actually take that? I mean, you might see some lessening of it, but at the same time, it's like you're fighting, you're fighting fire with like a squirt bottle. You're only ever going to put out so much of the fire. You have to I don't that might be a bad analogy, but like it's two steps forward, one step back kind of a situation. And it's a big part of why I think people are so frustrated just in general with treating KP. Like you can put as many acids on your skin as you want. You can scrub that skin as hard as you want, is never going to touch that barrier dysfunction that is at the core of the pathology of this follicular disorder. So that was another reason why I've done all of this is like let's target the upstream symptom, not all of the downstream symptoms. And if we can fix the upstream symptom, we will eventually eliminate, logically, therefore, we will eliminate those downstream symptoms from occurring, and then we can actually treat the skin more effectively. If you can reduce that irritability, if you can reduce all of that dysfunction that's in the follicular barrier, then all of a sudden these other treatments that you're trying, like a bleaching cream or acid peels or whatever else it is, suddenly you're going to be like, well, this is more effective because I'm able to get the net benefit from these treatments without also having it be detrimental to my skin barrier and the overall function of my skin, where it's so sensitive. So just decreasing sensitivity in the skin opens up so many different horizons in how you can treat keratosis pilaris or really any inflammatory skin condition. It's kind of like it's really hard to fix a problem. It's like it's hard to Gosh, I'm so bad at metaphors and analogies, but it's like if your boat's sinking, if you have a hole in your boat and there's water coming into your boat, is it better to plug the hole or is it better to just sit there with a bucket trying to scoop all the water out? Wh- there's in my mind, it's like you plug the hole first and then you try to scoop the water out. But for the last, since like mid 1990s to now, even before then, like going, I honestly, it's hard to find history even on keratosis pilaris because it's so poorly documented. The furthest back I've ever found any sort of research article on KP was 1902. And prior to that, I think they were calling it different things like Darier's disease and other stuff like that. So it starts to get kind of lost in the sauce a little bit. But I mean, we haven't really approached treating follicular disorders or inflammatory skin conditions differently specific to KP since like mid 19th century all the way up to present. It's just put scrub it with acid is the prescribed way of going about doing this, which does not touch the underlying condition, the pathology of it. So that's a huge focus. I think the closest thing to fixing that has been, corticosteroids and retinoid or, retinol or retinoids. Um, that's like the only 2 levers that we seem to have come up with as a consistent treatment, at least in dermatology. And it's like that's the thing I really wanna challenge is like, there's better. There's better solutions. We can affect other things around the formation of that skin barrier. It's just we need more attention on it. And, yeah, if it has to be me, I guess it's me, but, gosh, wouldn't it be nice if we had some sort of clinical research group that was made up of medical professionals that were looking at this a little bit closer. And I get it, it's like it's tough. Which becomes more important if you're a doctor or if you're a dermatologist. You wanna fix someone who's, like, literally has a debilitating disease that's, causing mortality or, just, like, severe impact on their day-to-day function, or are you going to put all of your research dollars into fixing a cosmetic condition? And it's like, I understand that argument for sure, but, at the end of the day, it's like we get all of these different treatments for psoriasis. They're constantly developing new things around eczema. It's like, well, why can't we just also like aim that at follicular disorders too, or at least a percentage of it? We don't need that much, just enough money to like move the needle slightly in the positive. That would be great. So, oh, I will mention one other thing. This is another thing I haven't talked a whole lot about, but it's going to be in the research article that I'm going to be pushing out on the website and on Reddit, which is phospholipids. I don't know if anyone is familiar with phospholipids here or have looked into any phospholipid treatments, but there are some really interesting treatments out there. They're geared more towards atopic dermatitis, but it's a lipid delivery mechanism for intracellular or not intra, excuse me, intercellular delivery vehicle. So it's like there are lipids that can be absorbed into the skin and help bolster that lipid lamellae. I think more effectively than a lot of other things. Honestly, if you're putting, some sort of ceramide or like barrier solution onto your skin, most skincare companies that are like, yeah, we put ceramides into this, the cholesterol and the fatty acids and those lipids that make up the intra or intercellular lipids that build out that lipid lamellae. Part of the difficulty in that and like applying ceramides to the surface of your skin is like, yes, it is beneficial, but where you actually need it is in between the corneocytes and keratinocytes at the stratum granulosum and stratum corneum strata at that skin level. Like you're literally, it's going to be so hard to see in here, but if you look, they like denote this with a yellow line right here, and that's really it. Like the stratum corneum is almost like a croissant. It's like layers of flaky skin cells that are held together through those lipids that have been secreted, and that lipid secretion is happening right here at the interface between these two layers of the skin, at the stratum corneum and stratum granulosum. So if you are putting a bunch of ceramides or cholesterol and stuff onto the surface of the skin, it's like, how far is that penetrating down? Is it small enough to get between these intercellular gaps and actually supplement the skin barrier and prevent pathogens, allergens from traversing that skin barrier? Same, and I mean, it's the same thing we're talking about. Epithelial barrier here, interfollicular barrier has a similar build out and function to the surface here. So another reason why like atopic dermatitis and KP are so integrally linked. But the difference here is like, all right, how do you get those fats, those cholesterol and lipids into the areas where it's actually needed to fill in those intercellular gaps? And a way that I've seen this being done, I've actually gotten a prescription for this before, and I think it is very effective, very interesting, is through the use of these phospholipids. It's a delivery mechanism that can actually get through these gaps. However, again, very expensive. I got a bottle of it prescribed to me. This is actually from the same dermatologist down in Dallas that I had went to go visit, and we're chatting with them about my KP, but I got a phospholipid topical. And with my insurance, and this is again, I don't know, maybe if you're not in the US, you might have a better time with this. Not going to get into like healthcare in the United States necessarily, but I paid $680 for a tube of phospholipid topical that was meant for atopic dermatitis. I can put the name of it. I have to go find. I'll find the name of it. I can drop it in. But that phospholipid tube is so much more effective, I think, than like a lot of occlusives that you would put on your skin to help retain moisture and things of that nature because it does penetrate down into that barrier. However, phospholipids are very expensive to produce. A lot of different pharmaceutical companies have patents on the production of them. That's like something that they're keeping very close to the chest because they can use it for like medication delivery, drug delivery, things of that nature too. But there are other opportunities out there to improve that barrier that go beyond even what I'm trying to do by stimulating the body's natural mechanisms versus like actual supplementation. There are some really interesting things out there that you can still do. And this is all stuff that I'll be putting into this additional research article, but just trying to give everybody a well-rounded toolbox of things that they can apply towards their own KP that may or may not be beneficial depending on the individual. That'll be forthcoming here, hopefully before the end of this next week. KP definitely affects mental health. 100%. I agree with that. It has affected my mental health. I'm sure it has affected mental health of people all around the world. And I have received so many messages from different people over the years that are dealing with different struggles with that. Another huge motivating factor for me pushing all this out was just like, yeah, even if it helps like just a handful of people, at least I tried. And yeah, some of the messages I've gotten, especially moderating the KP subreddit, people that have found me through different means and reached out. Yeah, there's some tough ones. There's been some pretty rough cases of people having this condition and just having nowhere to turn that I feel for them, and it's Yeah, and I don't it sucks, and it's another reason why I don't think that we can flippantly just kinda push this stuff off. There's a reason there's been such an outreach for me just putting this little thing out, like, who am I? I'm just I'm just a guy that was making a bunch of lotion, and I had built out this lab, and I had the means to do it. I saved up a bunch of money, and I delivered it, but it's like, the reason I'm doing all of this is because there is no progress in how we are treating follicular conditions. There's none. And I feel confident in saying that because at this point, I have talked to so many dermatologists. I have spoken to so many people. I have paid for research from chemical engineers at different colleges to come in and review the stuff that I've been putting together and just asking them, I'm like, is there validity to this? Because there is nothing else going on in this space. And at this rate that we're going right now, unless someone is focused on this and developing some sort of better solution for follicular disorders, nothing else is going to happen. It's going to be the exact same products. Like I buy almost every KP product that comes out. There's another thing. Like I have this is the most recent one. This remedy for body bumps, right? This was one that I had picked up. There's a guy that's been all over social media, Dr. Shaw. I mean, I've watched all of the content that's out there that as far as I can tell, Dr. Dre, all of the social media dermatologists. I've tried all of Gold Bond's products, Eucerin's products, Glytones, Touch KP, KPOA, Beyond KP. Like the list just goes down. I've tried each one, and it's like honestly, and it's not so much I'm expecting them to elicit a different reaction. It's just I'm curious to see if there is actual innovation taking place or if we were just recycling AHAs, BHAs, retinoids, and then we started over again. And it's like, well, maybe we'll put more urea into this one. Or maybe we'll put more AHAs into this one. And it's like none. I just my focus on this is how do we touch the underlying condition, and that's what's going to happen going forward. So, again, I was super excited to just get this out. The response from this month has been like overwhelming. To be honest, I didn't expect it to work great for everybody, but I was super hopeful, and I feel like I've gotten the feedback that there are people that are having really good success with this. There are also people that are not seeing results. And I honestly, as I move forward, the people that are not seeing results from this are so much more interesting to me than the people who are seeing results. Like the people that are seeing results, it makes me feel so good. So it makes my heart happy. But the people who are not seeing results, that's, I guess, maybe just the way my brain functions and how I've been looking at this my entire life. But it's like, okay, there's still a problem there. We still have to go figure out what it is, and I start building out some sort of, theory on what we're seeing because like all these mechanisms are happening at such a low level in the skin, but we still can see the behavior exhibited in the skin on the surface just from looking at what's happening. So it's like, how do we fit this into this, overarching um thesis I've put together, and I think that is eliciting some like really really interesting ways that we can move forward and making better topicals that are targeting the underlying pathology and not just acids. So, Charlotte, yeah, will Smooth KP be sold on Amazon? I was just talking about this. I am in the very last step of getting Smooth KP into Amazon, fulfilled by Amazon, so that they will be able to distribute. You can order this through Prime and get your products that way, so you don't have to pay the outrageous shipping costs. I'm working on production as well too. Yeah, I was just about to say this, Peach. So you mentioned this. So yeah, bigger bottles. I'm working on this. So just like starting up any sort of skincare company, I struggled to find any sort of production lab that would work with me on a production run of under like 100,000 units or even 50,000 units. Like at some point, the financials don't work out for them, where they're like, okay, it's going to cost us more to clean all of this production equipment than it is that than we'll make off of producing this topical for you. So I have a partner. I have a commercial production lab that makes cosmetics. Um, they're actually in Utah, and we are working through all of this together right now to essentially I'm looking at how I can make it more cost effective in this follow up production run, which I'm actively working on. I'm flying out, back and forth from there, talking with these folks, and then also how can I improve the overall sizing? I don't know which one's going to come first. I don't know if I can make this either more efficient, we stick with 6-ounce bottles and it's just more cost effective to purchase more, or if I'm going to be able to do larger sizing and reduce cost that way by offering more bulk items. Again, I'm just a single it's me and my wife doing all this stuff, so there's not like a secret team that's producing this on the back end. It's all self-driven. So I have very, very, very tight margins in how I can make this work. And with this next production run, I have gotten it down to the point where I think I have a way to make this more cost effective for the volume of lotion that you're getting. It's just I have to make sure that it is going to work with this next production run. And then once I have that locked in, then I think I'll be able to implement some of those changes. So stay tuned on it. I'm doing my best, but yeah, the other thing with the shipping in Amazon that will probably come first before you see the larger bottles being offered. So multiple avenues going, but yeah, working on it. So I know, you go through. I mean, a lot of these bottles too. I was just looking at this, but AM Lacton has their what is it like smooth bumps or something. I forget the name of it, but it's a 3-ounce bottle for like $22. And I remember having those same, frustrations. This thing's 5.5 ounces, and I think I paid about 28 bucks for it. So it's like about a half an ounce less than what I have in these bottles here. But obviously they're spending a lot on this aluminum bottle and everything too. So I don't know. The economics of the stuff are really interesting. It's kind of hard to understand it from the outside until you're in it and you're looking at how much the supply chain costs, the ingredients. Like you have to source all of this. I don't want to source, raspberry ketone from some whack random place, either outside of the country or where it might not have like the purity levels that I'm looking for. You have to really like get this from supply chain all the way from ingredient production, getting those cast numbers, making sure that you have reputable businesses that you're working with, and then getting all of that supplies put in, getting the production run set up, getting the logistics of the bottles out. It's a lot. It's more than I expected, and I do this all on the side, in addition to my my actual career. So just bear with me. We're gonna get it there. I'm gonna make this more economical. I'm going to provide more options in the future. It's gonna be on the timeline of months, not weeks. So. Anywho, we're about 6 minutes over. If there's any other additional questions or anything like that, love to answer them. Otherwise, I feel like I captured better content this time around. Hopefully, we'll get this recording out. I'll see if I can retroactively apply captions to it. I think I probably can, and so we'll get some content out that way. But I really appreciate everybody that decided to join, ask questions. Thank you so much for participating in this and having any sort of interest in this. And I will just continue working on putting out content. Look out for additional posts from me this next week. And yeah, I love the engagement. I love hearing your feedback and your responses to how you think this is working for you. So whatever you can give me helps me in determining my next steps and how I'm going to continue producing this topical and what other topicals need to be put out there that might have additional benefit for keratosis pilaris. So I'll wait a minute here, and if anybody else has anything that they want to ask, we'll jump on it. But other than that, I'll probably be ending the live stream. Cool. Well, I don't see anything else in the chat, so thank you for joining. Really appreciate all of you, and I guess I'll see you next time. Cool. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, appreciate you all. I'm sure we'll be chatting again soon. So awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks, Peach. Have a great day, night, evening, wherever you are in the world. Bye now.